Luke chapter 5, starting at verse 33. Luke 5 and 33. And it reads, "One day, some people said to Jesus, 'John the Baptist's disciples fast and pray regularly, and so do the disciples of the Pharisees. Why are your disciples always eating and drinking?' Jesus responded, 'Do wedding guests fast while celebrating with the groom? Of course not. But someday the groom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast.'" As you're taking your seats, help me introduce the title for today's message. Everyone say, "Is today, someday?" You may take your seats. Is today someday? Famed writer Isaac Asimov, the progenitor for many of the sci-fi industry, wrote a short story entitled Someday. Now, some of you may be familiar with his work. The work of both Star Wars and Star Trek are based on his early writings, and even the new Apple series Foundation takes a direct correlation from his work and tries to translate it into modern times. He was known to be a writer around technology, constantly grappling with what does technology give, but also what does technology take away. In this short story entitled Someday, he writes about two young boys, one by the name of Nicolo and the other by the name of Paul. These two young men are growing up in a world that is filled with technology that is so far advanced that the two young men never learned how to write. They never had the need to take pen to paper. In fact, paper wasn't even readily available. They did everything via technology. And now, as the Nicky, as they would call him, is playing with an older model of a robot called Bard, he recognizes that the robot is deficient. This older version didn't have the new stories and new vocabulary. This older version didn't know about technology or computers, had no way of telling the stories of the lives that they were currently living, but always told stories about horses and cows and animals and kings and princesses and things that were very distant from their experience. And so these two boys growing up in this technological world began to work to see if they could update Bard. The one, Paul, who was a kind of not a shapeshifter, but he was really good at being one way and then another way. He was amazingly intelligent, came up with the idea, well, what if we take some of the newer things and put it into older Bard, and maybe he would learn how to add these words. And this is exactly what they did. This young man shows ingenuity. They begin to update Bard, but they still are missing some things. Bard has new words, but can't rightly use them. They want to learn how to write, so now that they can put something else together so that they can better feed information to Bard to see if they can bring him up to date. And as the two young men run out of the room to go try to figure out where they can find pen and paper, one of them bumps into Bard. And bumping into Bard, it knocks the circuitry off, and Bard kind of turns back on and now goes into a learning mode, begins to communicate, and it's starting to tell a story, but it's starting to tell a story about a robot that nobody cared about, that had been locked into a basement that people always talked down about, and the robot's name was Bard. And Bard starts to talk about that someday Bard himself, or Bard itself, would learn more and do more, be able to get out of Bard's own confines, no longer with the humanity that did not value it, be Lord over it, but one day, or someday, Bard would be able to rise above them. And as the short story ends, it ends with this circuitry off, and all that Bard can continue to say is, someday. Someday. And this constant refrain almost made it seem not only that Bart was talking about himself, but now that this was hopeful thinking. Someday, things will be different. Someday, I'll inhabit a world that is not the world I live in now. Someday, my limitations won't be my limitations. Someday, something will change. Someday, I won't be held down by those that don't care about me and find no value in me. Someday, I'll be able to live into the things that I know I am more than capable of doing. Someday, I won't just be what they said about me. Someday. And as I enter our text today, I enter in with a nod towards this amazing robot that maybe we too can better think about someday. Now, for those of you that have been paying attention, we've been in a series the entire month entitled The Strength to Stretch. It is our theme for the year. It is my intentionality to let us know, to alert our community that we'll be doing some things differently. We'll be trying some new stuff, that we may be stretched, that there may be some tensions that rise, some things that may not be completely comfortable, and that is par for the course. That experience is not negative. In fact, it is necessary for us to get to the brand new things. And I opened the series, in fact, with the verses right after this one. And what I've tried to do is be creative, is start one place, then go back to a beginning to come back to the very place that we started, to help us understand what I believe God is truly revealing for us in this moment. And we've had a lot of things. We've talked about not putting new wine into old wineskins, making sure that we recognize that there's a difference. It is not that new wine is better than old wine, but they do have different needs. And that the old skins may not be able to rightly handle the needs of the new wine. And at one point, the old wineskins used to be new wineskins. But all of that needs to come together, and that is the way I often envision community. That's what I hope that you feel when you come into worship and you look to your left and your right, and everybody doesn't always look exactly like you. Everybody doesn't stand for the same songs. What one song might grab for the other is another song for them. We mix hymns into our worship. We try to make sure that we're inclusive of a variety of different levels of ability and know-how, because we recognize that there's gift in the stretch. And God may be stretching us more. We didn't just stop there. Then we went back and we understood some of the first call to the disciple, and that Jesus now wanted to push out, to push back. And we started to recognize that even Jesus earlier, even before he gets to the new wine, has been communicating all this chapter that there are some new things that you have to do. And sometimes the new thing is redoing the old thing with a new presence. Sometimes the new thing is going back to places that you thought were not beneficial, were not successful, and you can go there and still gain something that had not been there before. Because when God tells you to do something, do what God says. We talked about it, and then last week we came back and we were just reminded that when we get a chance to talk about God, you can. That there is nothing that limits God's power. There is not an ability that God does not have. And if we could get to the point to use the rhetorical flourishing of the man with leprosy to call out to God and to remind God, God, we know that you can. We know that there is not a problem that is too hard for you to solve. You can. There's not an issue that you have that's come up against you and you don't have the answer to. You can. And all we're asking, if you will. And so today, after Jesus has done all of this, he started to call disciples. He's now pulling them closer in. He's been healing. His fame is beginning to go much further, really, than he desires for his fame to go. People are catching him at every moment. He can barely find space for himself. He retreats to wildernesses, and wildernesses become populated with people because they just want to be around him. Then he finally is coming back, and he bumps into a tax collector. bumps into this tax collector, and he invites the tax collector to come and be a disciple. Now, for some of us, that doesn't sound weird. When we think of tax collection, we think of IRS and or H&R Block. This is not the tax collecting that they were talking about. Tax collectors in this day were considered to be some of the lowest of the low. And let me tell you why they were considered to be the lowest of the low is because many of the tax collectors were actually Jews, but they exploited other Jewish people. They were under the same covering of God. However, they treated God's people as if they were objects to steal from, and they knew that the populace had no fight against them because they stood between them and the Roman Empire. They became users. They became or were used by the empire to inflict further harm on those that were already being harmed. Ain't it bad when it show people? Tax collectors, they weren't looked at highly because not only were they in an oppressive system, but then they had the audacity to add on to that oppressive system and take for themselves. Many of them got amazingly wealthy by inflicting additional harm onto those to whom should have been kin. And the people knew how to treat them. In fact, there were terms. In fact, when you told somebody to treat someone like a tax collector, that was a pejorative. You knew exactly what that meant. You meant to treat them as low as possible. They weren't even worth your time. However, you could not get away from them in that time. And Jesus now doesn't run away from them, even though he's a rabbinic Jew. He's constantly doing these practices, pushing up against them. He finds a man that is of this ilk, and he calls him to be his disciple. That alone is enough to be scandalous. That alone is enough for people to look at Jesus and be like, man, Jesus, what are you really about? We see these other folks, but this looks crazy. A tax collector? And then not only this, then Jesus goes to his house, sits and have dinner with the tax collector, with a whole bunch of other tax collectors there. Jesus is now surrounded by folks that are unsavory. And folks are beginning to wonder, how can I understand his message when I see his methods? Jesus, I don't understand how to understand you. And in this text, it doesn't tell us who these people are, but other texts in Matthew or maybe even in Mark, it'll say that this might be connected to John's disciples. Some might be folks that are at this party, but what we do know is there are some individuals who come up to Jesus to try to gain greater clarity. Why is it that your disciples seem so undisciplined? I've seen the disciples of John. I've seen the disciples of the Pharisees, and they fast and pray regularly. But when I see your disciples, they're eating and drinking. And they're not implying drinking water. How are y'all so spiritual and y'all don't do any of the things that communicate spirituality? How can we be following you and hear about all this manifesting of your power and healing and amazing things, and yet when we see you, y'all look like just some regular old Joes? Acting just like I act. I mean, at least if you want me to come and follow you, make it look like I need to live in a way that is so vastly different that it makes me aspire to be better. But this means I could just keep being me. What's going on with your boys? Why they acting like this? And Jesus responds, and I love Jesus' response. There's always a bit of curtness, while there's also a bit of openness for answering the question. He doesn't shoo the people away. He don't say, don't question me, who you think you is. But he asks a question. He reframes it. And he says, when the groom is with the groomsmen celebrating a wedding, do people fast then? Is not that moment filled with celebration, and that celebration full of eating and drinking? Shouldn't we be celebrating? Yes. when the groom is here. But someday, the groom will be here. Someday the groom will transition. Someday the very thing that we're celebrating will open us up to the space where now fasting will make sense. And I come to you today to ask the question, is today someday? Is today where we're recognizing that the groom is no longer with us and we should look out and not just be full of celebration, but also have some connection to the needs for fasting? Oh, let me come a little closer. Because for some of us, we're not sure exactly what fasting is. If you would look up the definition, in fact, we use it probably regularly, you know, you can't say words at times, regularly, in our normal communication when we say things such as breakfast. It's actually breaking fast. Fast is the intentional abstention of food and or drink for an extended period of time. This is the typical understanding. It is developed and evolved, if you will, to include so many other things. The idea is to stop a thing for something else. It is not just going hungry. It is not just starving oneself. One can easily starve. But fasting is with the intentionality of something else coming, the idea of a deeper spiritual connection oftentimes. And so there are moments to fast. But as I've looked into the text, especially this particular text, there were a variety of things that were being communicated that we might miss because we're not in that context. So they say one word to those hearers, and they would understand a multiplicity of understandings that we miss because we hear the word with our 2026 ears. And so might I help you just to regain some of the ideas that they would have heard when they heard the word fast. Well, it was supposed to be a practice. There are scholars that have done work both ways and other ways that talked about the rabbinic tradition of fasting twice a week. This is alluded to in Luke, and this is what they're going to, that there was a devotional rite. Everybody say a devotional rite. This is what they did to show their givingness to God, that the rabbis would fast twice a week. Monday and Wednesday. And this fast was intended to be no food. They would go with water only, and some not even water for the full day. They would do this to show their devotion to God. In fact, it became almost a badge of honor that the people who would do this were seen to be the more spiritual, the ones that you would follow. These are the good folk. And they would do it. And as is true with anything, there are two sides to a coin. There are individuals that were doing it for a right reason. They desired greater piety. They were trying to give themselves over to God and making sure that there was nothing that disconnected them from the God that they wanted to serve. And they showed it to say that as elementary and foundational as food is to my life, I am willing to give up food because there's something that is even more foundational even than the food I put in my mouth, because I know that there's something greater. I know there's something bigger. I know that there is one that could sustain me even where the food can't sustain me. I'm willing to tell the world and myself that this devotional rite not only was communicating externally, but it was also communicating internally. It began to subject one's flesh. The way that they would think about it is that there was the spirit, and then there was the flesh, the physical, tangible. And that if we fed the flesh too much, that the flesh would be stronger than the spirit. So fasting consistently made sure that we weaken the flesh so that we can strengthen the spirit, so that while we're living, we would know what to do so that the flesh would not overtake the spirit in us. Fasting was used for that. And in its right sense, that's what it ought to still be used for. But like with anything, when you do something right, folks could do the same thing and do it wrong. Now, since I recognize that people connected with greater piety, they connected with deeper spiritual devotion, I can fake those things and not be more spiritually devoted. I can just go and not eat and not have any change happening to me. But now I would walk around and I would have what looked like spiritual piety, what looked like connection to God, what looked like I was a follower of the one that made all of creation, when the truth is I was just a follower of myself. In fact, I would fast so that people would know I was fasting. I would fast to get more acclaim. I would fast so everybody knew. I would walk around looking so weak and enfeebled and infirm, and folks would be like, oh my God, look at such a holy one. Fasting, when they would hear it, was this devotional rite. It was meant to communicate a deeper closeness and connection with God, but also had been co-opted. There are a lot of times where things get co-opted. Then, fasting was also a sign of grief. Fasting is grief. I know we don't often think about that. We see this in 1 and 2 Samuel, definitely specifically 2 Samuel, after David has gone on this whole conquest to get Bathsheba, then to cover up that he had Bathsheba, then she got pregnant, and now the child is to be born. All of a sudden, Nathan comes up, tells David, God knows what you did. And you are the one that deserves whatever is getting ready to come. Pronounces that the child won't make it. David does something in utter grief and brokenness. He begins to fast. He refuses to eat as his son is so sick. He watches his child languishing, and he refuses to eat. Others, they fasted after terrible situations had happened. The destruction of the temple, the community came together, fasted in their grief. This was the place, the epicenter, that we heard of God. Where shall we go now? The community rallied together, bridled with grief, refusing to eat. The fasting not only was spiritual devotion and this religious rite, but it also became a signal of grief and sometimes a signal of repentance. God, if you would just turn your hand of wrath away. God, please don't let the calamity persist. Famine is in the land, and God, we need water for the drought. God, we won't eat, crying out to you, opening ourselves, acknowledging that we have been wrong, that we have not always done it right. We fast. And I feel the weight of that in this moment. As we wrestle with a country that is willing to deploy federal agents under the auspices, telling us that this is for our protection, that it is about immigration, and yet it is citizens who are losing life. When we listen to news stories and federal officials not even give facts correctly, and when we in other areas that are not Minneapolis feel comfortable enough to turn away our eyes and not to want to deal with the situation, it may not be you, but I'm dealing with the brokenness in my soul of what should we be doing when we see a world that is this unjust. And I recall the moments where internment camps happened, and there were citizens that turned their face and didn't want to look at the injustices, while slavery raged through our country, and there were so many that turned their gaze to try to act as if it is okay. We are in the same moment, and how dare we? I got faith leaders who were close to me. Man was shot a block away from his church. They arrested clergy in the airport. This ain't about immigration. And if we don't stand now, there may not be a day to stand. We ought to be fasting and we ought to be working. For any of you that have ancestry that have been kissed by the sun, for any of you that understand what oppression is, you ought to feel it in your soul. I feel the ancestors saying, how dare you? They ain't got to look like you. They ain't got to be you. But you know that type of oppression. How dare we? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Writing campaigns to our elected officials. We should be flooding Congress. We should be flooding the Supreme Court. Ain't no way in the world this should be happening 2026. We need to fast. There's national grief. When I think of a mother and a father having to deal with the loss of their son and defend his character because of somebody else's injustice and wrong actions, when they should be there being comforted, they're trying to tell a story about who their son was. And that don't even matter because it shouldn't have happened in the first place. They fasted over these moments where they were broken, where they were grieving, and they needed repentance. But they also fasted in preparation. Come on. Earlier in chapter 4 of Luke, Jesus, after being baptized by John, is taken into a wilderness. This place, the wilderness, had become a famed location for Jesus. It wasn't an occasional visit, but Jesus would go to the wilderness regularly. There was something that Jesus found in the wilderness that you can't get everywhere else. And this time, in the midst of his connection with God, he's not only met by God, but the devil shows up. Sometimes in trying to get closer to God, you got to expect for the enemy to show up. I know you might be doing all the right things, but every now and then, the right things are the reason that the enemy shows up. In fact, the more that you do the right thing, the more that the enemy seems to start shaking stuff. And I want to encourage you, don't stop doing the right things now. You are right where you need to be. You are doing what God has for you, and God is getting ready to show God's self strong. And the enemy comes up and watch this. Jesus is fasting while he's in the wilderness. And the scriptures tell us that Jesus is on a 40-day fast. I don't know if any of y'all tried that before. I have never fasted for 40 days. I got to 72 hours, 3 days. And it was so bad, I couldn't even stay with my family. I had to go to a place by myself because the hunger pains made me terrible. I was not a great person to be around. Jesus is now 40 days in. He's at the point where the body has already determined that it needs a new source of energy. That the source of energy is not just fat, more than likely it'll burn through the majority of that. It's beginning to break down muscle. It's at the point where the mind is so in need of nutrients that it begins to hallucinate. That sometimes the spiritual connection is your body saying you need to eat. And in this weakened state is where the enemy comes to find Jesus while trying to get closer and try to grab him. But all of this happens before Jesus starts healing and preaching and preparing for his major work. Because fasting was his preparation for what was getting ready to come. He needed to make sure that before he began to open his mouth, before he began to heal the sick, before he began to come against the enemy, that he had the strength to deal with the enemy himself. Every now and then, there is some preparation that you need to have before you can enter into the very next phase of your life. Jesus had lived for 30 years, and 30 years did not equate to what he was getting ready to go through for the next 3 years. And so he had to do something brand new, bigger, better, more deeply connected to prepare him for what was next. And he did it. And when doing that, he fasted. So is today someday? Jesus is gone. We see the ills of the world. We see the ills of ourselves. And we need the preparation for what's next. So, I'm giving you early warning that Emmanuel's fast is on the way. Amen. The fast entitled Stretch. We will be going through an intentional season to prepare us, to rid us, to grieve, to discipline us for what God has ahead. One of the things that I recognize, and this will actually lead us into Easter, so it'll be like our Lenten series. More information to come, but I want you to know it. Sometimes when I announce fast, they say I don't give y'all enough time. You need to prepare yourself. Pastor, I can't just stop eating like that. I need to prepare. Consider yourself warned. Starting March 8th, you got over a month to get your mind right. We will be entering a time of fasting together. And this is intentional. This is intentional because there's one thing that we do individually. There's something different that we do communally, and we'll be holding this together. Now, I'll give more information. You know, we typically do a Daniel fast, and we will. We'll have that available. However, this time in our stretch, it'll be more than just a Daniel fast. Some of you are vegan. The Daniel fast does nothing for you. You keep eating like you've always ate. At best, you may not have a drink, but this one will have that. And then there's some of you that sometimes it's hard based upon medications and all, what you can do. We want to have a multiplicity of ways for you to join into stretch. Because I believe that God is stretching us. And I want us to be ready for it. But even more than just that, as we're preparing ourselves, God has been so good to us. Sunday after Sunday, God sends new people our way. And as I review, as I go through reports, one of the things that it constantly talks about is that people's spiritual desire, their wanting to know more about God, is actually growing. And what better place than an outpost of heaven to help people navigate this? So this is our season to ready ourselves. I've been using a term, and it's still being workshopped, so just, give me grace, that we're Black plus, meaning that we're come from the history and tradition of a historically Black church. But that plus means that that's not the only people that are welcome in our fellowship. And the way that might look might stretch some of us. But that we still will hold to the beauty and the tradition of our church, which might stretch some new people. That God is calling us to be his witness in this world. Meaning that we should show up when we need to. I know that we're a planning church and, we got to get everything 1,000 years ahead of time, but there's sometimes we might need to be able to put out an all call and we show up. Show up for people. Show up so that when people keep thinking about who a Christian is, they get your faces. And not just all the folks on social media spewing hate. And because we don't know if things will change here.
Mercy, God. Mercy, God.
And at the moment that God might need to utilize us to be a safe haven, provide safe passage. For all of us from the ancestry of Africa, we know what it meant to have individuals who created homes and cellars to protect those who were being hunted. And we have a congregation that meets within our facility that is littered with individuals who might be on the list. We worshiped together. We did Pentecost Sunday together, and it felt so good. Let us not forget about them now. So I offer this to you. I believe today is the day. I believe that now is someday. And that someday is even bigger than just the fast that we have coming. It is about that. But this someday also is about us believing in a world that could be drastically different. Scripture tells us that Jesus said that someday the groom will leave. And the groom is left. But there's another part of that. One day the groom will return. The groom is coming back for those who hold the groom's name. And I want to be ready. I want to have my candle lit. I want to be ready for someday. I want someday to know that the God that cared so much to stretch down from heaven to lift me up, that I'll be ready when he comes again. And I hope that you all still get excited about what God has in store, that every single time we see the brokenness of humanity, the depravity that is in our world, it is a reminder that as good as this world can be, it pales in comparison to what God has for us waiting on the other side. There is yet a new heaven. There is yet a new earth. And it is sewed up for those who believe and walk in the right understanding of God. I believe it. And God, I'm looking forward to the someday. I'm tired of the today. I was on social media. I wasn't even going to talk about this, but I just can't not say it. I was on social media the other day, and there was a white pastor on there that made the declaration that 90 to 95% of black churches are heretical, don't know the scriptures, and need to be broken up and be taught by white pastors. Beyond my initial assessment and response, it broke my heart to recognize that this person had actually missed the gospel. And not to try to do a hierarchy, because I don't ever profess that I got the gospel perfectly, but missed the gospel because he believed there was only one understanding that was true, and that it would come from the perspective of the very people who would have hung Jesus on the cross. Howard John Wesley says it often. He says, it's so funny to me that in a few months we're going to celebrate the life of a Middle Eastern man killed at the hands of federal agents. And there will be people who celebrate him who are doing the exact same thing. We miss the faith when we don't stretch ourselves to really understand what it's about. Jesus is talking in this moment. His disciples are celebrating. They have him close. But already in his speech, he's alluding to something. Someday, I'm not going to be here with them. Someday, my passion will be extended in such a way where I will be stretched wide and hung high. Someday, I'll go through things unimaginable and my blood will spill to the ground. Someday, they'll even put me into a tomb. But someday, I'll get up again. Someday, I'll set them free. Someday, they'll have hope for tomorrow. Someday, they'll have power over what the enemy has lorded over their heads. Someday, death won't even be able to scare them. Someday they won't have to worry about on the other side, because they'll know that there's a power that resides right on the inside. Someday the very enemy won't be able to stand up against them. Someday they'll be able to walk in power under my name. Someday I'll be able to make sure that every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess that at the name of Jesus. Someday, and I'm praying that someday might become today. I'm praying someday might become today. Pray with me.